Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today I'm doing a reel in the box versus a reel in the bag. This is an Okuma. It's a bait feeder. It's the EB, I guess that stands for Epixor bait feeder 65. And this one came in pieces and parts with a note that said they were working on the drag system. And well, the spring shot off. I guess some other bad things happened. And we're can I help them put it back together again? Well, putting the drags back together again, relatively easy. They actually have a spare spool that should work with that, but we'll show you how to put the regular spool back. But I think more importantly, as I've been testing this, well, suffice it to say that the reel itself needs some help too. Well, one of our viewers actually pointed out that one of these washers popped out of the preview. I was able to locate that, but I don't see the two metal washers that go along with that. We'll figure it out. That shouldn't be too much of an issue there. And then I guess we have some spare body case washers as well. So we're going to take this reel apart first, because when I was testing it, this thing is very, very sluggish and it needs to be serviced. And then we'll show you how to service that spool. But more importantly, the Epixor, it's been around a while. It's a bait feeding reel. To let your spool travel free, you go into bait feeder mode. That's by clicking the arm on. That'll allow your axle shaft to let line out without moving your bail. And then when you're in strike mode, closes down, locks that shaft in, and then you rely on the top drag from the spool. You rely on the top drag to provide the fight drag for you. But as I mentioned, this one's crawling along here. It should be doing much better. It's a 10 ball bearing reel, but it doesn't feel like it has any ball bearings in it. Very sluggish. So we're going to take this apart. We'll see what we can do to get this thing fishing the right way and get the drags on that reel so that it does act as it should. All right, well, while I'm taking off the exterior pieces and parts, I would encourage you to subscribe to my channel. If you do subscribe to my channel, please hit that notification button. That notification button will enable you to see when I post the fishing reel videos, and you'll be able to determine whether those are videos that you would like to watch or not. I work on all kinds of reels, this being a pretty much a bigger bait feeding spin fishing reel, but I have all types in here, everything from small freshwater ultralights to, well, very big reels. I work on the bait feeders, the spinning reels, and kind of everything in between. All right, so you have to remove the screw and gently pry this out. I've seen these snap, so gently pry these out so that you can clear that other piece, and then the button should come off this side as well. Just like that. And if possible, I usually like to leave that on, but in this case that doesn't seem to be something you can do. Once I take those off, I put those pieces into a parts tray. It's the bottom of a fast food container, and that parts tray enables me to locate the parts when it's time to put them back together again. Well, this side plate for the reel, it goes underneath the rotor, so you need to take the rotor off before you can remove this side plate. I was just noticing, it looks like we have an anti-reverse override on this reel that's been broken off. That kind of tells you a little bit about the condition of the reel overall, and probably why it is acting as sluggishly as it does. Well, I just removed the click ratchet on the spool set. That little ratchet, there's a click tongue here, and that's going to make a noise as your bail spins, or as your rotor spins. That little click is going to run on that click ratchet, which is probably the noise maker in this reel. We're going to take that set screw off so that we can get to the rotor nut, and then I think we're probably going to need a deep socket. In this case, our rotor nut's a little loose. This rotor nut comes off. You can see right here, they're telling you on is counterclockwise, off is clockwise, so turn that nut clockwise until you remove it, and then you should be able to remove the top end of this. We're going to do a little bit of a cleaning on that in a bit. This is an old school reel to the extreme. We have the top bearing here. We have an old school anti-reverse. And we're going to go take the bottom of this off so that we can access the gears and clean those up. I don't think you need to remove that anti-reverse. And it looks like the ball bearing for this one, or one of the ball bearings for it anyway, is going to be right on top. All right, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 side plate screws. If you have any questions on this reel or any reel, and you would like to know more maybe about how bait feeders work, or what their appropriate uses are, or maybe just about Okuma and the reels that they make, whatever, leave them in the comments section. The comments section is an open forum. You can ask questions on any reel. It doesn't have to be this reel. And if I know the answer, I'll be happy to give it to you. If I don't know the answer, well, I'll either try and do some research on it, or I will find somebody who does know the answer, or try to direct you to somebody who might know the answer. You saw that I laid all of those screws out. I wanted to make sure that the 4 screws that I removed are all the same size. They are, so they can go on my parts tray as well. And this fast food container has 2 cavities to it, and that's good. I like to use the corners of the cavities kind of to store the certain pieces and parts. We should be able to remove that now. Looks like the adjuster on the bottom here has also been lost somewhere in service. And this is the bait feeder mode now. So we got a couple of things going on here. We have the main gear, a bearing. This is just a hold down clamp inside the main gear. We have the crosswind block. Here's your hold down for the crosswind block. We'll get there in a moment. Crosswind block below it, crosswind gear. This is your trip mechanism for your bait feeder mode. All right, so the next thing up then would be to remove the axle shaft. We're going to do that by removing this U-clip. And that's got two C's on it. They're going to grab the slot in the axle. That goes into my parts tray. Now the axle shaft will come out. Now the axle shaft came out nice and smooth. That's always a good thing. You want to test to make sure that it's not bent. And here's the 2 grooves I was talking about. And you can see how the C-clips will grab that axle shaft. That'll hold it onto the crosswind block. When you remove that now, we should be able to just remove this entire piece here. Just trying to see if there's an easy way to do this without removing that clip lever. There may not be. This is a good place to tell you to take pictures along the way, because if you do lose your spot, you can always come back, reference the pictures, and get yourself back working again. I get a lot of reels. This one is a reel in the box for a different reason, but I do get a lot of reels in where something has failed along the line in the reinstall, and then it's kind of a cry for help. Well, I noticed that there's a spring on the back that's controlling this one. You'll see it when I take the main gear off. But it looks like I do have to remove this trip lever. So I'm going to take a micro screwdriver. See if I can get my hand out of the way to show you what I'm doing. To get that one screw out there. There's a screw and a spring on that assembly. Looks just like that. That's your assembly piece. And you would want to take a picture of that, knowing how that goes. And also that that spring is going to attach to this post right here. That should clear the way for the main gear removal now. And this is the spring I was trying to not disrupt by leaving this mechanism in place. You don't have to remove this mechanism. If you've removed that mechanism and you're sitting here going, my gosh, I got to figure out how to put that spring back in. Well, here's a note. There's a hook on that spring that goes through the eye from underneath. Coil is facing towards the inner part of the reel, and you have a little kind of a Pac-Man look on the stud here where the other arm of that rests. So that's that side. All right, we should be able to remove the crosswind block, which is pretty much full of some old grease. Just find a pliers here. I like to grab the stud to remove the, I think we have probably have a screw in there covered by some old dirt. We do. So we want to remove that screw as well. And then we'll be able to clean the interior of this reel. And we'll make sure that the dried grease is replaced with good grease and that the reel turns freer and easy. You can see the old dried grease on here. That's a cause for that performance problem. All right, this should come up easier now. Sure it does, just lifts right out, right? I'm going to take that screw for the crosswind gear. I'm going to clean that crosswind gear. I'm going to put that right where I put the screw. I'm going to use a cotton swab just to get the old grease out of the channels behind it. That's only going to bog it down. There's a little washer that just fell out from the other side. Again, that's why it's good to take pictures along the way, so you don't have any question where those pieces came from if you didn't notice it fell, and then all of a sudden you look down on your table and there it is. All right, face is clean. I'm checking the teeth now. The teeth are all clean. They have no grease in them. The grease was hiding behind it in that crosswind gear. I'm going to do the same thing on the main gear here now. And I like to use a penetrating oil just to kind of dissolve some of that old grease. That's pretty crusty grease in there. And I'll start with a cotton swab, see what I can get out with that. And there you go. That's a performance problem waiting to happen if it hasn't happened already. And as we noted, it's pretty sluggish in this reel. This reel says it's got 10 ball bearings. I can never find them all. Then again, I don't look too hard. They hide them in the handles and in the line rollers and places like that. To me, I've often been asked, how many ball bearings do you need? I like to say 3. I like to see 1 on each end of the drive gear and 1 on the pinion gear. The rest are helpful, but not necessary. All right, I'm just continuing just to try to clean that off the back of the shaft there. And now I'm going to take a hard brush and just going to pull through those teeth as I inspect them to make sure that they're not bent or chipped or worn or cracked or anything like that. And I also want to check the back teeth. This is the gear that drives that oscillation gear, and they need to be uniform as well. So check profile. In this case, look at the ridges on the main gear, look at the ridges this way, then turn it opposite and do the same on both sides there. Well, we look like we're pretty clean now. I think that's all good. Just going to set that into my bin. And now I'm going to try and figure out which ones are the mounting screws for this this crazy device. We've got so many things going on here that it's almost not worth disturbing. And the first thing I'm going to do is see if I can't get this out with just the 3 screws to service the bearing and the pinion gear. It may not be possible. If it is possible, I'm going to leave that anti-reverse gear in place, the clutch. Now, you don't normally service an anti-reverse clutch. What you want to do on an anti-reverse clutch is you want to make sure that it's dry, free of grease. Let's move that crosswind block out of the way. And let's see if this thing can come out without all those other things. There's so many screws in this here. I just don't know the purposes of them. And I guess we're not going to be able to do that. So I'm looking at 2 here. Let's start with those. I'm looking at 2 on the outside that appear to be mounting screws to the case. So let's go ahead and see if we can't find out if that's the answer. There's a whole bunch of floating springs and ball bearings in these old style anti-reverse clutches, which is why I'm hesitant to open this whole thing up. But if I can get this whole thing off with 2 screws, well, then I'm gonna do just that. Well, there's no luck there. Okay, when I find a small one, that tells me that's not holding the case on, so that small one's going right back in. Only those long screws have the ability to get down to the case. That's a small one, that'll go right back in. That also helps to keep some logic to what's going on here. If you did need to service the roller bearings on it, it's these small ones. There we go, now we can take it out. Wow. So that's why people don't, they overlook this thing. Just never an easy thing to do. All right. Roller gear out. This is just the shaft collar for the clutch. I'm trying to get that bearing pushed out here. Okay, with a little time and a lot of effort, I was able to push this through. And again, this is the anti-reverse. We're leaving it just the way it is. I'm not going to open that up. There's no need to. But I did want to get to this bearing to clean this up. I want to test it. Wow, that is tight. I'm going to flood this bearing and just let it sit off to the side for a moment while we clean that case up. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to remove all the old greases. Taking that pinion gear out makes cleaning very easy here. The back bearing is working fine. I'm going to leave that in the case. I am going to grab my fishing reel oil, oil up that bearing. Let that soak. And this one would normally have a cap on it. That cap is off. I'm not sure what's going on there. Okay, where's that main gear? Here's that main gear. I'm going to take this bearing off. Do the same thing here. We have that little piece that's the handle holder. Knock that out. Remove that bearing. Do the same thing with this. You got to clean these up. Let's go back to this bearing, see if we got any movement there. Yeah, it's starting to loosen up. There we go. So just use some oil. Eventually, it's usually freezing because it's been stuck for a long time without being oiled or lubed. Now we got it working again. Just give it a good squirt, and then eventually it'll just start spinning again. Got to do it by hand. There's no easy trick to that. There you go. Now we're working the way we should. Flood that bearing. Flood this bearing, which is working fine. And I think we can go reinstall. We've checked most of it. We'll clean off this pinion gear. I'll do the same thing with this. Got a lot of parts on the table. Normally they would be in the tray, but I know I'm going right back in with them. We'll do the same thing. We're going to take the brush. We're going to clean those grooves in the pinion gear off. I like to brush it towards the paper towel so that if I do pick any particulate or debris or the like, it lands on my towel. It's probably a good time to get rid of the towel. All right, we're going to just kind of reverse the process on this one. Give it a good dose of all the greases since there hasn't been any in here. Now we can grab that freshly refurbed bearing. And I think I'm actually going to have to do this kind of the way we did it before, how it came out. I'm going to go ahead and put the shaft in from underneath. Put the bearing in on top. Grab the 3 screws for the bearing, hold that down. And then once we tighten that down, We'll have that all held in place and we'll be able to reinstall the whole clutch piece. These clutches are hard to find too. So this is an early style anti-reverse clutch. Almost all of them now have gone to the smaller edition, and they got away from the springs and from the roller bearings. They just went to a roller bearing type of a setup, a singular. What you lost in doing that is you lost the ability to do the override on them. So these were designed so that you could override the anti-reverse. This one's working. My guess is on the override to that there was a spring that pulled it this way to release it. And again, I'm never interested in tampering with those. Once we do that, we know that the anti-reverse override was sitting up this way somewhere, so let's line the screws. This is your anti-reverse override collar, so you need to line this up so that, there you go, so that we have the two on the side. The collar was right here, it's missing the spring, and then the others just kind of fall in place. We left the small ones in so we didn't have to worry about the releasing those spring setups in that drive setup there. I don't know why they decided they needed all these screws, but maybe they got a sale on screws somewhere. Not quite sure. All right. So these are interesting. These reels became very popular on the East Coast here with surf fishermen, and also those that were chunking, live lining baits. Sometimes you'll actually hear the bait feeder called a live liner. It was designed to put a bunker in the lake onto a hook and let the fish swim without you opening up the bail every time you needed to let some additional line out. First time I saw it, I thought everybody would want one, and then, well, you learn after a while it's a bulky reel, and you probably don't use that feature a whole lot. All right, we're going to take our crosswind block. We've cleaned that up. Get our grease bucket. I'm using a fishing reel grease. I use Penn Precision reel grease, and I recommend that you use fishing reel greases only on fishing reels. I'm really not particular which one you use. Each is designed for a marine environment. That's the important part. General household greases and automotive greases have their drawbacks, and sometimes I wind up cleaning up a lot of those drawbacks. So recommend that you only use the fishing reel greases there. We've greased that crosswind block. Now we're going to go get that little brass type shim washer. We'll get the tie down screw. They're all right in my parts tray, so it's easy to find. We'll get that micro driver. Put that back together. Before we go too much further, let me just take a look at that drag washer setup below, make sure that those are okay. To do that, there's a U-clip here that's holding that whole assembly in place. Just pull that clip out. Then that whole assembly is just going to pull right down. You're going to have a pressure plate kind of a setup and a spring underneath. And we should be able to push the rest of this out. Yep. Here's drag washer number 1. That's in good condition. I guess we only have a single in there. Okay. A lot of times folks even skip this part. Up, there's one washer sitting up top here. That looks fine as well. All right. Just wanted to check to make sure they weren't broken. These things so rarely wear out that folks generally just skip the servicing on it. I don't, but it's always good to note. When you're going to put this back in, there's 2 tabs here And there's 2 tabs in the case here, one on each side. Make sure that those tabs line up, otherwise you won't be able to get that clip on that we took. Now the good news is you can look through a window here and you can see how it's setting in, and that's setting in properly. You have plenty of room here for that clip to go back in. Okay, and that's your reinstall of that clip. All right, let's take the moment to go ahead and grease up the main gear. I decided to go down below first before I put the main gear in, because if you start tilting the reel, pieces start to fall out. There's no particular rhyme or reason in terms of what pieces you need to do first, but from experience you do tend to learn after a while that some of them just don't hold up well. All right, so we've got that all greased up. There is a shim washer behind that we left there from the main gear. That's all taken care of. We want to come over to our crosswind block, clear out any old greases in that channel and restore with new grease. That new greased. Just noticing that the front end of this was not cleaned. We'll get there. So much of reel repair servicing is about cleaning up the old stuff and putting the new stuff in place, inspecting the parts. That's where you get into the repair side of it, is when something needs to be replaced. But generally speaking, most of the reels, if they're serviced regularly, you rarely run into broken pieces and parts unless there's been some kind of trauma to the reel. Snag that kind of tried to get muscled out of a lack of lubrication. Those kinds of things will lead to broken parts, but for the most part it's just generally about cleaning. All right, we've reinstalled the crosswind block. Now we can put our axle shaft in, make sure that that's nice and clean. Grab the grease brush. Light coating here, because anything more than a light coating is just going to get scraped off as you put it through your pinion gear. You got to thread it through your crosswind block, and then you got to line it so that it comes through the rear drag system. 2 clips, line your slots on each side of the gear so that those clips can go in. And then it closes like a little door. And once you close it like a door, just push it in with your screwdriver or whatever to make sure it's nice, firmly seated there. At this point, you can actually turn everything, make sure that it's working, which it's doing fine. Now the only thing we need to reinstall here, other than the side case, is the trip mechanism. So we're going to go ahead and put that back on, put a little bit more oil on there, doesn't hurt. And then we'll remember the trip mechanism because we have that in our tray. And the only thing that ever gets me with these darn trip mechanisms is the little springs and the little screws. I'm going to try and hold that screw in place to get it started. That could have been worse. Tighten that up so that it comes to the way it should. And then my other nervous point is always that little spring. Try and grab that with a pick first. And again, pictures help on these. If you don't have the confidence, take the pictures. We actually have it set properly now. So again, the spring is going to attach to the post back here, sitting in a indented section of that. We've tightened this down. We've got our trip mechanism. Let's turn it one more time. And when the case is on, this is going to ride low, and it's going to push that up and back. All right. Very good. All right, we're going to install the side plate next. I think that's probably why I have a new side plate cover here, because that gasket looks well, a little bit out of place. So let's go ahead and put that gasket in here. Take the old one out. This is like putting a gasket onto a valve cover of a car engine. Look at this thing. Okay, I stopped the camera because I was struggling with this a little bit, and I did find that if you use grease and you line the circumference of the side plate with the grease, that it actually tacks down that washer. So we're ready to reinstall the side plate now. Our gear is on. Simply flip it over, line it up, set it in. Okay, that's a nice firm set. We have a little bit of a slice here, but that's the new gasket. So we're just going to go ahead and put those screws back in now. And that'll compress those right away. I did just turn the top part just to make sure that the gears were moving fine. They're all set the way they should be. Don't force anything. If you're working on something that's just not cooperating, just take a deep breath, come on back in, check it again, make sure that it's installed the way it should be. Go check your schematic if you've been out of sorts with the schematic. Maybe you didn't have a part the right way. Could be on something like this if that gasket had slipped off, for example. Just take your time. Patience is going to persevere every time. Okay, one more of these up top. So the body's cleaned up now. Okay. Okay, I'm going to put the rotor back on. Nut. Remember, that came off in a counterclockwise manner. I'm sorry, came off in a clockwise manner. So this is the reverse of that. You're going to go counterclockwise to install. And that one is hand tightened only. I'm going to go one more quarter turn with the ratchet. You need the ratchet to clear that axle shaft. Let's give it a spin. Oh my gosh, what a difference already. Well, that's because we freed up that main bearing. And the anti-reverse bearing is holding in place. Beautiful. Okay, let's go ahead and put the trip lever back on. Let's go tie that down. These parts are right in the parts tray. And they're the reason why that parts tray exists, because I don't want to lose these pieces and parts, particularly on a reel that's a little bit older, and parts may or may not be available for it. Now we have that little kind of a holding part for your screw assembly. This one was mounted from the right side. Go ahead and put this in. Now we'll give this a twist and we'll see how it goes. Oh, what a difference. Look how free that's free and easy down the road I go, right? Throw the bait feeder, releases your axle shaft, trip the bait feeder, locks it in. Norm, you got quite a reel here. We're going to deal with your spool, but right now I'm going to take that spare spool that you gave me, because they're both for the Epixor, even though they have a different style to them. Let's see if I can put the button on it here. I think you probably have a little bit different button on the other. Yeah, you have a different button. Okay, we're not going to be able to do that part, but you get the idea. That's an Okuma bait feeder that's running the way it should. We want to come up top before we finish the service. You want to make sure that you throw oil in the seams of the bail. You do not need to remove the bail itself. Give it a spin, make sure that it turns the way it should. And that is it. That's the service of the Epixor EB65, a bait fishing reel from Okuma with the free spool action. We showed you how to take this reel apart. We showed you even how to replace the side plate gasket. What we didn't show you is the reset of the drag stack. I got to go find a couple of comparable washers and a hold down pin. And once I do that, we'll be all set here. So I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, please like it. If you want to see more, please subscribe. To all of our first responders and essential personnel, thank you for everything it is that you do to keep us safe during the pandemic. Your efforts and heroism truly are appreciated. To all, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day. Okay, and as a prologue, I was able to find the metal washers that were missing and the spring clip. We're going to go ahead and put the button on now. Just make sure that it's all holding down the way it should. And we'll call this one a success and say it's got a second chance to go fishing again. All tightened, he's ready to fish. Go into bait feeder mode. Your spool is going to turn backwards. Spin it. The reel is going to trip. Set. We're ready to go fishing. Hope you've enjoyed that. Thank you.